Thank you, everyone, for your very warm welcome. I have to say, as someone who's been in the military for a lot of my adult life, I enjoyed that very rousing march at the start of the service. That was lovely. It is also a very happy coincidence and quite a gift as someone who was ordained in the Diocese of Newcastle to be reminded of Sister Angela and of Stroud, a holy place to many of us. And perhaps I think a place that shares a few things in common with the Mount of Transfiguration. My memories of Stroud are, more than 15 years old now, but I remember it as a place of great tranquility. I think a place that the Celtic tradition would refer to as a thin place, where the barriers between heaven and earth fade away and we are closest to the presence of God. They are places where hopefully the noise and distraction and demands of our everyday life are left behind and our discipleship has room to grow and mature. I suspect that the high mountain to which Jesus withdrew with his closest disciples is one such account. It is, as is so often the case, Peter, who is well-intentioned, but misunderstands what's going on. His instinct is to hold on to the wonder of that moment, to contain Jesus and Moses and Elijah, and to have something to do. He wants a work to do with his hands, because the intensity of the encounter is so overwhelming for him. Perhaps he also wants to cling to the beauty of the moment, because discipleship is hard work a lot of the time. I very much know that instinct. I used to be an absolute stickler for putting my Christmas tree up on the fourth Sunday of Advent and taking it down on Candlemas. But this year, Christmas was a wonderful respite for Teddy and I in what was a very demanding season of change for us. And so we're not quite ready to let it go. As you can see, it's still hanging in there. I think we have until maybe Shrove Tuesday might be the very furthest that I can push it. So I understand where Peter is coming from, and I suspect a lot of us know his temptation. So often we read the account of the Transfiguration just as a theological event, and a very significant one, that fulfillment of the law and the prophets in Jesus is established as Moses and Elijah stand there, compressing vast amounts of time and space into the span of a redemption in a single moment. The divinity of Christ is so obvious in that story, and it's certainly a fairly monumental thing to ponder. So we read it on this side of the resurrection when we know how the story ends, and it makes it much easier for us to categorize. We read it as confirmation that Jesus was and is and always will be divine, and we're very comfortable with that idea already, and so we move on. But I like this telling of the Transfiguration in that it also speaks to the way in which those very rare and very precious encounters with God's presence shape our discipleship and sustain our vocations afterwards. We sometimes tend to miss that part. We attend easily enough to the part of the story where Peter and James and John walk up the mountain and they encounter the transfigured Christ. But we're not so good at attending to the reality of what it must have been like for them to walk back down and get on with their lives, saying nothing of that vision to anyone else. The example of Peter in the scriptures is a gift to us precisely because it's full of imperfection and misunderstanding and learning and growing. Building a resilient enough faith to survive the many challenges to our dreams and ideals requires a lot of acceptance. When our own glittering images have fallen away, we have come to terms with knowing that there will be many occasions that are ordinary and anxious and not mountaintops that are bathed in the light of heaven. That's not to say that God just slips in and out of view randomly just to keep us on the journey long enough. That's a very temporal view. The dawn is always there for us, but it's very difficult to see if we don't make physical and spiritual space for it. That is signposted all through the gospel geography. Whenever Jesus needs to pray or has something of particular significance to teach the disciples, they withdraw to a quiet place. But a quiet exterior, I have found in my own life, is not so much good if the interior is not also quiet. It is some encouragement then, I think, that Peter is the same outspoken disciple to whom Jesus will then say, I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. I just want to show you all that my little boy at the moment is pretending to preach alongside me with his Marvel, his Hot Wheels City magazine. So he's just practicing for a future vocation. Yeah, babe. Just in 1 minute. I will be with you shortly. It's a relief, I think, that story that Peter, who fails all the time, is then the centerpiece of the gospel mission. I think it's a relief to those who wish that we were more like John. I wish I was more like John, but actually know that we're more like Peter. Of all of the disciples, these three in particular share many of the same experiences of Jesus, but then they go on to very different paths after the resurrection. Each is sustained by the experience of the mountaintop, but each in their own way. I think in the well-worn life of a resilient faith, we have to get used to long silences in prayer and the challenges of building a community with people that we do not always choose for ourselves. We have to make room for that turning aside and being surprised by the full majesty of God. They are moments of sustenance for us on a long road. I wish there was a little bit more that we knew of that story. I wish we knew if Peter, James, and John ever went back to the mountain and pondered what had happened there. I wish I knew, because we get only such a short fragment of the life of Christ in the Gospels. And I wish we had their stories of returning, because we have lots of those stories of returning. And we know that we go back to a place that has been meaningful for us without going back to being the same person. We've moved on. Perhaps it is, in fact, because of that very place that we're not the same anymore. We've had time to ponder and reflect on its holiness and what it means for us. So I find that today's gospel challenges me to pause in each of those encounters. Pausing is not something I'm great at, but it is the challenge of this story. Each encounter with God in that holiness, and treasure it so that I can be ready and willing to descend from the mountain into the life of quiet faithfulness and discipleship to which each of us is called. Amen.